Picture this. You're moving through space at the speed of light, dodging asteroids, comets, and ice crystals, all in the black silence of space. Then, all of a sudden, you reach a point where all that matter just stops, vanishes without a trace. From there, all that stretches ahead of you is that void, and a few twinkles from distant stars that are unthinkably far away. You just fell off the Kuiper cliff of deep space, located beyond Neptune and Pluto in the third zone, the outer reaches of our solar system. One question echoes through your mind. What happened here? This mystery is the meeting place of two still unexplained phenomena in space, one a possible explanation for the other. The first one, the Kuiper cliff, rarely gets mentioned by name except for in a few passionate mathematics blogs. The other is a source of global headlines, intrigue, and even terror, and has been for decades. The famed Planet X, or Planet 9, depending on who you ask. Now astronomers say they've gone through old data to find new evidence, suggesting that it's real, and that if it is out there, we're gonna find it very soon. Join me as we unravel some of these mysteries and enter the Codex Legendarium. I'm Shelby Melanson. When elementary school kids get their first explanations of the solar system, they mostly talk about the planets, the sun, the moon, and the asteroid belt. That is, 9 planets if you were in grade school before 2006, or 8 plus 1 asteroid belt. But what if we're talking about 10 planets and 2 asteroid belts? I know you're here for Planet X, and there's a lot to talk about on that front. But first, trust me, you want to know about the Kuiper cliff. Without it, we would have no clue about the possible existence of Planet X. Right between Mars and Jupiter, the asteroid belt is home to chunks of rock and ice ranging from the size of a small boulder to the size of Texas. But little do most people know, there are actually 2 asteroid belts. The second one doesn't get nearly the same hype because it's very, very far away, close to the edge of the solar system. Okay, but what's so special about this particular zone besides the fact that it's shaped like an interstellar donut? For one thing, it's 20 times wider and 200 times bigger than the asteroid belt that most of us know. Besides that, it's the source of a few of space's weirdest mysteries. Gerard Kuiper was the first to suggest it even existed back in 1950, and that was a feat, considering it's about as far away from us as Neptune is. If one astronomical unit is from Earth to the Sun, or roughly 93 million miles, the Kuiper belt is 30 times farther than that. Basically, it's really, really far away. Because of that massive distance, only one spacecraft has ever visited. NASA's New Horizons mission flew by Pluto and its moons back in 2015. Kuiper is known as one of the fathers of modern planetary science. He also predicted other things, like what Saturn's rings are made of, the moons orbiting Neptune and Uranus, plus details about the atmosphere of Mars. He even hypothesized that the lunar surface would feel like crunchy snow, and Neil Armstrong confirmed that later. Here's where it gets weird. If you travel another 200 or so astronomical units deeper into space, all those asteroids, comets, and chunks of ice just vanish, as if there were an invisible boundary confining them inside or blocking anything else from coming in. Or as if they were just swept away by something massive. It's even weirder because predictions say that it should be the opposite, that there should be even more objects past that point. Science currently has no proven explanation for this, but there are some theories. One of them just says the objects in this part of space are just smaller, so small that we can't see them. The other is where Planet X comes in. The theory is that a full-size planet with an absolutely gigantic orbit around our sun came right by and grabbed all of that space debris, sweeping it away into its own gravitational orbit. That brings us to the other half of the Kuiper Belt mystery. It's home to a bunch of major space objects, or Kuiper Belt objects. Pluto for one, plus dwarf planets Sedna, Makemake, and Eris, among others. But here's the thing. Some of these objects have strange kinks in their orbits. Movements that, according to physics, they shouldn't have. Unless there's a very large planet out there stirring up gravitational chaos or something else. The trouble is, we can't see a planet there. We first noticed it with Sedna back in 2004. A decade later, in 2014, we noticed another celestial object had a weird orbit, just like Sedna's. An astronomer from Caltech is the one who connected the dots. Since then, we've spotted 13 other objects with the same quirk. And these finds have offered more and more evidence that trans-Neptunian objects, aka stuff further away than Neptune, are out there, or at the very least, were out there at some point. And if that's true, this would literally rewrite our entire understanding of the origin and function of our solar system. Before we can look for Planet X, first we need to know what we're looking for. Based on where it could be in the solar system, the impact it could be having on nearby objects, and a lot of math, this is what we know. Planet X would most likely be a gas or ice giant, and around 4 times the size of Earth, just like neighbors Uranus and Neptune. It would also be anywhere from 5 to 10 times heavier than the Earth, and it might be surrounded by moons. Its atmosphere would be full of helium and hydrogen, and its average temperature would sit at a frigid negative 226 degrees Fahrenheit. All of that is pretty standard, but here's where Planet X hypothetically becomes very unique. The biggest difference? It's really far away. Remember we talked about how far away Neptune is earlier? About 30 astronomical units, or Earth to Sun measurements, away from us, or around 2.8 billion miles. But if you think that's far, Planet X is predicted to be around 20 to 30 times farther away from us than Neptune is. That's anywhere from 400 to 800 astronomical units. And because it's so far away, it would take Planet X anywhere from 10 to 20,000 years for it to orbit our sun once. That's like 2, if not 4 times older than our oldest written record of human history, depending who you ask. So what could possibly have caused it to stray so far, yet still somehow be tethered to our sun? One theory says that if Planet X was formed while our solar system was still very young, inside the area where our sun was born, there would have been quite a few celestial objects and not a lot of space. Imagine what happens when you overstuff a room. Somebody usually gets pushed out or sent flying. The study's author says what might have happened to Planet X could have been like, quote, watching pinballs in a cosmic arcade. And if the conditions were just right, like Goldilocks style, a planet that got ejected into the distance could still get trapped in orbit around the sun, just an extremely wide orbit. Other theories suggest a different scenario, that Planet X was originally wandering through deep space after getting kicked out of its original home. But then it flew just close enough to our sun to get wrapped up in its gravitation. Either way, the hunt for Planet X started decades ago, but looking at the epic search's history will get a little convoluted unless we address the elephant in the room, the name. Planet X or Planet 9. Speculation that another planet could be circling far outside our solar system has been around for a long time, and the mystery planet has gone by a few different names. The one mainly used in astronomy circles now is Planet 9. Before that, the first man to predict its existence, Percival Lowell, called it Planet X, X as in unknown. The rebrand is tied to a similar one Pluto got back in 2006. That's when the International Astronomical Union decided, and then there were 8, and demoted little Pluto to a dwarf. Not sure how thrilled Pluto, aka Hades, the god of the underworld, would be about that designation. But jokes aside, I have my own thoughts about this, and so do a lot of astronomers. But the discovery of Pluto and its subsequent name change is deeply tied to the hunt for Planet X. So let's break that down, and then we'll get back to the naming discrepancy. The search for the unknown planet has been going on for a very long time. The astronomer we talked about a minute ago, Percival Lowell, he first started talking about it during lectures he gave at MIT back in 1902. He published a book about it a year later. Keep in mind, Neptune had been found just 50 years before, so planetary discovery was still very much on the brain for astronomers at this time. The possibility of Planet X captivated Lowell, and by 1905, he started searching for it. His system worked like this. Lowell had already established one of the first observatories in the country back in 1884, and that was his base of operations. From there, he hired a small team of computers, which were actually just people who were super good at math. Their job was to do an absolute ton of calculations based on the unusual orbits of planets like Neptune, and from there, pinpoint possible locations for Planet X. Then, Lowell carefully photographed those parts of the sky with his 24-inch Clark refractor. Side note, that telescope is 32 feet long and it's still open to the public at the Lowell Observatory in Arizona. Lowell upgraded his setup over time, getting his hands on new telescopes and a millionaire calculating machine to speed up the math. He kept at it for years. A decade after he first started the search, he published his findings called A Memoir on a Trans-Neptunian Planet in 1915. He died just 1 year later, before he finished his search. But Lowell wasn't the only one in the family with an eye on the sky. After a long and messy legal battle, his nephew took over as the Lowell Observatory's trustee. He wanted to prove his uncle was right, so 11 years after Lowell passed, he picked up the search. Lowell's younger brother pitched in too. He was the president of Harvard University at the time and offered up 10 grand to build a special kind of telescope designed for astrophotography, an astrograph. It was perfect for the job, but they needed someone to operate it. Here comes one of my personal favorite American success stories. Clyde Tombaugh grew up on a farm in Kansas. He was one of 6 kids, a hard worker, an excellent student, and an extremely gifted, self-taught telescope maker. For most young people in Middle America at the time, prospects for higher education were slim. But Tombaugh had big dreams. So after years of perfecting his own scopes out of old farm equipment, he started sending in detailed drawings of Mars and Jupiter to the only observatory he had ever heard of, none other than the Lowell Observatory. They saw his talent immediately and invited him to come to Arizona to work on a unique sky survey, the search for Planet X. Tombaugh jumped at the chance, seeing this as his golden ticket. Little did he know that not 2 years later, he would go on to change everything that we know about our universe. In January 1929, Tombaugh began the painstaking process of photographing areas of the sky from Lowell's memoir. Each photo had to be lined up perfectly, within half a millimeter. He often backtracked to make sure that he didn't miss anything. Inch by inch, he captured the sky, every night inside an unheated dome where winter temperatures often dropped sub-zero. The more photos he took, the more piled up to sort through. Each one had to be carefully examined for possible planets. Astrophotographers call this blinking. One single lapse in concentration could mean missing Planet X entirely. He said the risk of that haunted him all the time. A year later, in January 1930, he estimated that he had scanned 1.5 million stars. Think about how insane that is for a second, sorting through images of 1.5 million stars. But his work paid off, because 1 month later, Tombaugh actually did it. On February 18, 1930, he discovered a planet. It just wasn't Planet X. Instead, what he found was soon to be named Pluto. Fun fact for our Wizarding World fans out there, Pluto was actually named by an 11-year-old girl in England. She suggested the name, which beat out Minerva and Cronus. Yeah, that's right, Pluto was this close to being everyone's favorite Transfiguration teacher, Minerva McGonagall.
That was bloody brilliant.
Oh, thank you for that assessment, Mr. Weasley.
Here's the thing. A lot of people assume that Pluto was what Lowell had been predicting all this time. Case closed, Pluto is Planet X. Or was it? But there's no way Tombaugh just so happened to find Pluto when he was actually looking for something else, right? Something that was still out there, lurking in the depths of space. Not long after Pluto was found, scientists started calculating its orbit. Long story short, it was quite a bit different than what Lowell had predicted. Not only that, the world's most powerful telescopes at the time couldn't see any details on the planet's surface whatsoever. Since that could be done for every other planet, they assumed Pluto must be very small, much smaller than the large gas or ice giant Lowell predicted Planet X would be. And if it really was that small, then it also wouldn't be heavy enough to cause the kind of gravitation that would disturb the orbit of Neptune. You know, the exact thing that got people speculating about Planet X in the first place. But even then, plenty of people still brushed that off, calling it an impossible coincidence that Tombaugh, in reality, found a planet while hunting for an entirely different planet. But not everyone did. The mystery and debate sat there for half a century. Technology hadn't advanced enough to measure the mass of a planet that was so far away. And without that, there was no way to tell if it really was big enough to be Planet X. But finally, in 1978, astronomer James Christie found Charon, a moon orbiting Pluto. And by measuring its orbit, we found out that Pluto weighs 455 times less than Earth. Way, way too small to impact Neptune, and too small to be Planet X. So Pluto just happened to be in the area, which brings us back to Percival Lowell. Why Planet X has multiple names, and why so many people were so ready to reject Lowell's Planet X. And why even today, plenty of them still do. This is my own speculation. The reason why comes down to two issues: Pluto's 2006 rebrand and Lowell's interest in Mars. Lowell was widely credited as a great scientist with some really solid scientific work, including the lead up to finding Pluto. That is, until he became really interested in a theory from back in 1877. An Italian astronomer came up with the idea that the surface of Mars was covered in canals with flowing water in them. That's after he observed lines on the surface of the planet with his telescope. Lowell was fascinated with this idea, and he took it a step further. He believed that canals worked like aqueducts or long-distance pipelines, designed to bring water from the Martian polar ice caps to the planet's population. He was totally convinced. He wrote that, quote, that Mars is inhabitable by beings of some sort or other is as certain as it is uncertain what these beings may be. As you can imagine, his reputation took a nosedive for this. His observatory and the people who worked there suffered the same fate. And that shadow didn't even lift after he died, and probably still hasn't. He and his observatory are still mostly remembered for his Mars interest. Another quick side note, NASA has already discovered evidence that Mars could have supported ancient life in the form of organic molecules in the ground. It's still a far cry from canals, but I can't help but find it sad that Lowell didn't live to see that. Fast forward to 2006. That's the year the International Astronomical Union decided Pluto was no longer a planet. Here's how they justified it. A planet must 1. Orbit the sun, 2. Be round, and 3. Be big and heavy enough to have kicked most objects out of its orbit. Like we talked about back in the beginning of this episode, Pluto is inside the Kuiper belt, a region where, before you fall off the Kuiper cliff, is full of small asteroids, rocks, and ice. Because of that, they say Pluto is too small and the gravitation too weak for planet status. As you probably know, there are plenty of people and astronomers that disagree with Pluto's rebrand, and unfortunately, they get lumped into the same category as Lowell. The biggest argument is that planet versus dwarf planet basically comes down to semantics. The second is that it disrespects the man who found it. Think about this. A farm boy in rural America taught himself how to make telescopes. He was determined to chase his dream against all the odds, worked super hard, and went on to make a discovery that got his name in the history books. That is the definition of the American dream. Not to mention a Medal of Honor for American ingenuity. I mean, there are only 3 civilizations/countries that have discovered planets. The Babylonians found the first 5 beyond Earth, British astronomers found the next 2, and Tombaugh found Pluto. Meaning the US is one of only 2 modern nations to make such a discovery, and we're only 249 years old. Just in case that explanation is a little too grounded for you, going from 9 to 8 planets in our solar system comes with some cultural hiccups too. The number 9 has been a symbol of cosmic perfection for thousands of years. It represents the cycle of life, harmony, wisdom, and maturity. It appears several times in the Bible, from the 9 fruits of the Holy Spirit, the qualities and virtues found in righteous people, to the time Jesus died, the 9th hour. In Norse mythology, Odin hung from the world tree for 9 days and nights to gain wisdom. Indian traditions and the Baha'i faith call it a symbol of completeness. In Chinese culture, 9 is a symbol for permanence, so it's used as a long and happy blessing for newlyweds. Buddhism, plus tons of other spiritual practitioners around the world, use it to symbolize spiritual enlightenment, or awakening. Basically, the fingerprint of God on the universe. 9 months also marks the creation of new human life. And beyond that, 9 is super special in math, music, and science. Everything from the electromagnetic spectrum to the organ systems in the human body to the periodic table to string theory. You can see why a whole host of people might not agree with shifting our cosmic neighborhood from 9 down to 8. And hey, Flagstaff, Arizona made the whole thing a part of local culture. It's right down the road from the Lowell Observatory, and Pluto has everything from a sushi roll named after it to its own coffee blend. The whole state of Arizona also recognizes Pluto as the state planet, and the governor actually signed a bill in 2024 making it a planet again. There are so many jokes in there. Okay, so where does all this leave us? Where are we in the hunt for Planet X? And why are headlines suddenly going crazy about it all over again? The thing is, it never really ended. NASA actually funded a citizen science project called Backyard World's Planet 9 starting in 2017. Basically, it encouraged anyone with an interest in the stars to pitch in and search through images captured by NASA's WISE mission. Why? Well, according to the website, there are simply too many images for NASA to look through. And, quote, there's still no substitute for the human eye when it comes to recognizing subtle motions in astronomical images. Sounds like Tom Bach got it right. Backyard Worlds is actually still going on, but that's not what's making headlines now. A team of researchers from Taiwan recently got inspired to pick up the search. They took a similar approach to the citizen scientists by diving into data archives, specifically from missions that were hunting for Planet X. They focused on info from 2 satellites, NASA's infrared astronomical satellite in 1983 and Japan's Akari satellite from the early 2000s. And soon, they found a suspicious dot moving across the sky. And across all the images they looked at, this dot was consistently bright and the same color, so it wasn't just space noise. That was in May of this year. 1 month later, in June, other scientists from Rice University in Texas and the Planetary Science Institute in Arizona looked at thousands of computer simulations of our solar system. And according to them, there is a 40% chance that Planet X is real. The best part is, we may not have to wait long to find out. This is why everyone and their mother in the science and tech section, if you will, has been on the edge of their seat recently. The world's latest and greatest observatory might be able to spot it. It's called the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile, and it's home to literally the newest and most powerful survey telescope on Earth. For my fellow camera nerds out there, this thing has 3,200 megapixels and a focal length of 33 feet. That's like putting 96 of my beloved Sony a7 IVs together, which are awesome for astrophotography, by the way, and mounting a lens on it the size of a school bus, okay? Or if that's too geeky for you, put like 200 smartphones together. Okay, back to the Vera Rubin Observatory. The very first images from it just got shared in June this year. So how are we going to spot Planet X? One study suggested it might be surrounded by up to 20 moons, which could help us pick it out. As for why the Vera Rubin is the new Planet X champion, it's huge, so it can see really faint, faraway objects. Plus, everything it sees will feed into a computer that will constantly compare those images to earlier data. So any changes, say Planet X traveling through the universe, will set off alarms. Some of astronomy's biggest supporters for Planet X say this observatory is the perfect system to find it, and that it'll probably happen within a few years. Now, it wouldn't be fair if we didn't talk about the arguments against the possibility of Planet X. One of them is that the main candidate ID'd by studies has a different orbit than what's been predicted for Planet X. Besides that, a 2021 study debunked it, but in my personal opinion, there may have been some room for error. The study scanned 87% of the sky visible from the southern hemisphere over 6 years. Researchers then processed those images in a way that, quote, might uncover faint sources, but at the expense of losing positional information. The survey found 3,500 Planet X candidates, but couldn't confirm any of them. They concluded with 95% confidence that Planet X doesn't exist inside the area they looked at. But they also said, quote, the results cover only about 10 to 20% of the possibilities. My point here is not to rip apart this one particular study, and to their credit, they did list 10 candidates for future investigation. I'm just saying that for something as dim, small, and unusual as a planet hiding at the edge of the solar system, we might need a little more than that to rule it out completely. Another main argument proposes something else, that Planet X was there, but now it's gone. Astronomers recently spotted a new space object nicknamed Ammonite. It's a lot like Sedna, and it's deep in the Kuiper belt beyond Pluto. But its orbit looks different than Sedna's and the other disrupted orbits in the neighborhood. Because of that, some scientists suggest Planet X was in the solar system, but it got ejected at some point. Or if it's still there, it could be even further away than we expect. Let's say something is out there, and here's a real curveball for you. What if it's not a planet? One really unusual theory actually suggests that it could be a super small black hole. We're talking the size of like a grapefruit or maybe a bowling ball. And if it is, it would be what scientists call a primordial black hole, basically a leftover from the very, very early universe. Two physicists from Harvard argue that a tiny black hole could have done the same thing as a planet, flown a little bit too close to the solar system and started to orbit. If it is, we'd expect it to be surrounded by a gigantic ring of dark matter, which could help give it away. If we don't have a black hole in our backyard, maybe it's a Death Star. I'm joking, but you'd never actually know. A few points on this though, it would have to be something the likes of which beyond the bounds of even our best sci-fi, because even the gargantuan space station was actually only about 100 miles wide and mostly hollow. The Starkiller base was a little bigger, but still probably not big enough. That one was just about 400 miles wide, or about 1.5 Grand Canyons. For reference, Earth is about 8,000 miles wide, and even Pluto, far smaller, is around 1,500 miles wide. That's roughly New York City to Kansas. Okay, let's save this discussion for a sci-fi realism episode. Although, fun fact, the US military formally and hilariously refused to build a Death Star after a petition suggested it to the White House in 2016. Although, you and I both know they totally did it. Setting aside the revamped excitement over Planet X, we still have at least a little while to wait. And in the meantime, I feel like this is a good opportunity to reflect on the old adage, no seeing, no believing. Caltech astronomer Mike Brown says, quote, "It's really difficult to explain the solar system without Planet 9. On the other hand, there are just as many, if not more, who basically say, keep dreaming, it doesn't exist." No matter which camp you're in, I think it comes down to this. For as long as humans have existed on Earth, we've been seeing new things, embracing our curiosity about them, and learning. Every single thing that we know about the universe was once totally far-fetched and unbelievable. So is it really that hard to believe there's a lot more happening in the cosmos than we know about yet? The observable universe is 93 billion light years wide, and we don't even understand 5% of that, let alone what's beyond it. NASA says this beautifully, quote, "We have yet to send a space probe to even the nearest of the billions upon billions of other stars in the galaxy. Humans haven't even explored all the worlds in our own solar system. In short, most of the universe that can be known remains unknown." If you ask me, that's actually the best part. Coming from a gal who has a print of the pillars of creation in her living room, I'm on the edge of my seat every time the James Webb sends us a new, profoundly beautiful glimpse of that unknown. But the fact that we don't have it all figured out is a good thing. I say, stay curious. Don't lose the sense of wonder that floats away when all the mysteries are gone. And look up at the stars knowing there's a lot more out there than meets the eye. But what do you think? Is Planet X real? Are we gonna find it? And will it be what we predicted or something totally different? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into mysteries, myths, culture, and science, drop us a like and subscribe. There's a lot more coming. Thank you.